right.
I might just start to say, you know, maybe how I even heard of Montessori, because that's pretty, was pretty rare in Wollongong. And at the time, my daughter was almost 3, and I had a son that was 1. And I went for a weekend with friends to Mount Hotham to ski, and they had 2 children that were going to Montessori in Sydney, and they were just amazing. They were 4 and 5.5, and they took care of the little ones. And there were 4 little ones that were 1 and 3. Up from 1 to 3. And so I was amazed, and I said to the mother, you know, what are you doing? They're so independent, and they care about each other and so on. And she said, oh, it's Linfield Montessori. That's where my children go. And so I started to look into Montessori in Wollongong, and there was just a tiny little community school in Berkeley, which is a suburb that Josie lived in, and she was very involved in it becoming Montessori because it was opened up in her church. So she was very, very instrumental with that young group of parents that decided that they wanted a Montessori preschool. And so that was really the beginning of my journey. I was so impressed with my friends' children and the behaviors and how beautiful they were. And Josie was working behind the scenes to create this beautiful environment for my children to start at.
Yes, and I have been in Montessori since the age of 3. So.
Yes, so there you go. What comes around goes around. And she did Montessori as a child, as an adolescent. And so Josie taught me so much. She was my mentor all along the way. But hi, Alex. Eventually I ended up becoming very, very involved in the school. And the parents at the preschool were very concerned because they loved Montessori, and they had no place to go after that. And so the year before I joined, they had negotiated with an alternative school that was, I think it only was 1 class, because the families were arguing about policies and procedures, you know, can they climb the trees? Can't they climb the trees? You know, so the place was virtually not falling apart, but they didn't have the leadership or the focus. And so the families decided that they would approach this alternative school. And so Josie was the person that started that up. The alternative, so the Montessori classroom. And as she said, there were 11 students.
And when was this? Do you remember what year?
87.
87, okay.
Yeah.
And was that Eleanor?
Yes. And my daughter was, I think, number 12. She was accepted mid-year because she was doing really, really well in the preschool, and they felt that my son, who was going to move in next, I don't know what the rationale behind it all was, but they thought that we should apply for her to go to Eleonora at a younger age than anyone else. She was 5, wasn't she, Josie?
Yes, she was just here.
So Josie had a 1-room class with a 5-year-old all the way up to year 6.
Wow.
So it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a poor school. They were in debt. Everything needed to be repaired. The furniture, the carpets, everything was a mess. And so the parents had to do all that work. They worked really, really hard. They tore out the carpets. They fixed all the electricity. They did much. You know, it was just amazing, that community spirit to create Eleonora at the very beginning. And we had markets that we ran every weekend. So parents were rostered on 7 times a year. They had to be there at the wee hours before, you know, in the dark to set up markets. And they had to, you know, negotiate with the people at the you know, sometimes there was conflict and we had to sort that out. And so, yeah, it was a challenge for us. And then by the end of that, you know, you'd be there at about 5:30 and you'd be there till about 2 o'clock. And so, you know, when I think of what everybody put in to create what they did create in the beginning, it was a huge effort.
That was a fundraiser.
Well, it actually gained, it had about, it got $40,000 a year. So that actually subsidized the fees. And so sometimes parents didn't want to do the markets, so they'd pay another parent that possibly could use that money to pay for their child's fees. So again, it was a really interesting way that we operated. But
yeah,
the working bees and the markets kept it afloat.
Yeah.
And the parents actually would go in and relieve Josie for her lunch break as well.
Wow.
Because we had no extra staff. She was doing everything. And I became very involved because my area was management, quality management, and so on. And every time she needed to go through an inspection, I would be there to support her to go through school inspections. And I remember the first one we got marked down because we didn't have a urinal for the boys. Remember that, Josie? You know, really unusual things that we didn't anticipate. But anyhow, we really had a great community spirit, and the parents would have morning coffees and do a lot of parent education themselves. And so on. But the one thing that I found really interesting was that initially I applied for my daughter Cotty to go in at the age of 4, and they were rejecting her because she wasn't 3. And I found that really, you know, confronting in a way. And it was because the new directress had been trained in her course that you start with the children at the age of 3.
Yeah.
And that's what she wanted to do. She did not want children that were 4 or 5.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was something that really stuck with me. So I never said no to children that were an older age. And I know some schools would say, if you're haven't attended for the first plane, you cannot come for the second plane. You know, that to me was, I thought, whoa, what would Maria Montessori say about that? I don't know if she'd really agree with that. Yeah, so it was quite an interesting predicament that I was in. But the enrollments officer was wonderful. She really advocated for me, and Cotty was allowed to attend. So that was very nice.
Right.
Because what if, you know, I wouldn't be here tonight talking to you if that was the case. It would have been the door shut on my family. So, yeah.
Yeah. I've had many students come in later who had public school background who just seemed to be made for Montessori, and they just fit in right away and just, you know, ran with it. It was like they'd been there all their lives.
Yes.
And then I've had students who are in Montessori all their lives, and it's like it was always a bit of a struggle for them.
Yes.
So it really depends.
It made me sort of question some of the, I guess, the way it was being practiced. And the other thing was not allowing a full day program for the 3 to 6. And so Josie and I were really, we pushed the boundaries there. People thought we weren't being authentic by keeping the children there all day. And again, I thought, well, what did Maria Montessori do? She didn't send them home at midday. So we started to do all of that.
Yeah.
Those sorts of.
Sounds like it was a true community school from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Montessori on a shoestring.
Yeah.
I think that's a book, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what was your role then after that? As first you started as a parent, and then how did you get involved?
Well, I was a parent for 11 years doing voluntary work and really managing the school. And that I took on every position on the board. So, I was the treasurer, I was the enrollments officer, I every role within that organization. And it was becoming far too big for me to manage anymore. So I basically said to the board, you need to hire somebody because I can't do this anymore. And there was a parent that was the president there, and he said, well, look, I think you should take the job on. And so that's what happened. Mm. And that was in 99 that I did.
So it was a board run school in the beginning.
The first 10 wow. years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was challenging in itself. I really felt for the staff because, people weren't there through the day. They were there at the beginning and at the end of the day. And so, they really, really had to hold it together. And, but I guess my role became, I was this person that could see where we could move next, because I've got a planning background. So it was always, well, we need to do this, we need to do, and chasing grants all the time. That was the big thing, that I would get grants for anything and everything that we could get. One thing was with docs, when we first started the preschool, because this was primary that we had only one classroom for primary. And I felt really we need to have 2 feeders for the primary. 1 feeder is not enough. And so I put together a position paper on that. And we decided to build the preschool on the site because we weren't having any luck. Josie and I'd be looking everywhere for another site. And so we just built the preschool there. And while we were building the preschool, we got approval to set up to start the first group, because Josie said it was best to start with the small group and then move on as we went. So we had 6 children that we started in this room. And then docs came in and said, oh, you can only have 5.5 children in this room. So who had to go home but my son, because my son was one of the youngest son, my 3rd child. So, he had to go home until we had the other site built. But that just showed me that the bureaucracy. And the other thing I had to do was apply for 10 years to get a grant for recurrent funding for the preschool.
Yeah.
An application every single year. And the person that was in charge of early childhood in Wollongong at the time thought Montessori was elitist. And she said, it's only for the wealthy. So you can pay for it and I'll give this money to the community preschools. So I just kept applying and applying and applying, and we finally got it. And then that was it. We were fine.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm.
Do you think the bureaucracy was worse back then, or easier, or about the same?
I think it was, they didn't understand Montessori. I think the Board of Studies, and Alex and I have had so much experience in that regard, because again, it was due to growth and development that we had challenges with the Board of Studies. I think they understand us a lot better now, and they know that we're not going away. And that was, initially they were trying to bully us to not do what we wanted to do. And so You know, it was really, we don't understand you, go away. And that wasn't going to work for us. So, yeah. But I think nowadays there's a lot more bureaucracy. There's a lot more, because they've added on all of these extra structures for, you know, a quality assurance and so on, they've created this whole new body of people and have added extra costs to all schools and to all preschools to operate. So they've added extra costs without real outcomes, you know, student outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that comment that they made, that Montessori is elitist? Do you think that's true?
Well, I actually did think that, because I thought, well, why would you only offer a half-day program? It's only the people that can manage to find somebody to take, you know, to sort the afternoons out. So that was really part of our rationale too. And the other thing we did was really try to keep the fees down as much as possible. And so I always promised the families that we weren't going to go crazy with fees, because that would not, that would be elitist. So again,
Yeah.
the staff were amazing at understanding that we couldn't, there would be times to be able to buy things and other times that we couldn't. And so they were always very tight with the pennies. They'd find deals here, there, and elsewhere. We'd get furniture from the library that they were throwing out, or from the TAFE that they were throwing out, or I'd go and buy, you know, secondhand furniture from the Department of Education. And so we always made cost savings in those sorts of areas, but put the focus on the staff. So that was the big thing, but the staff were behind it 100%.
So, how long were you in a leadership position at Elanera?
Well, as I said, I volunteered for 11 years, and then I was hired, and then I was there for 16 years. And that's quite unusual, because I tell you what, it's not an easy job. It is really a tough gig, I think. And don't you think, Josie?
I think that's about 3 times the average turnover of most principals, at least these days.
Yeah.
Quite short, really. It's like 5 or 6 years, I think.
Yes.
So how did the school grow in the time that you were there?
Well, every 3 years we put on a new building because we got a grant. And so that meant we'd develop a new stage. So that's how we grew. We ended up having 2 cycle 2s and 1 cycle 3 and a preschool, all on this very small site, which was a house. And then I put in a grant submission to get the place next door, but there was a battle axe between us. But yeah, she was more than, yeah, she was, we tried to buy her property as well. But anyhow, we had to walk across her property, and then we had a lovely little, I guess the original farmhouse of that farming area where we were. So that was lovely. And then we set up the high school in that site, in a one room classroom. I think it was the staff room that we'd actually created, and then the staff gave up their staff room so that we could start the high school.
So how many students were there when you left?
There was about 100 and, I don't know, if 150, if you included the little ones in the toddler, but we never did include those numbers, it would be about 150.
Wow. So from 11 students when you started to 150, that's quite a feat.
I think the challenge too was was really the high school. And that came about when, again, my youngest son was, I guess, instrumental for me, because he said, come on, Mum, why can't we have a high school? And so Josie and I and another parent got together and went to the university and put together a curriculum for the high school and submitted it. And we were absolutely stunned that they would say yes. We did not expect it. We thought we'd put that in for the first year, and then we'd refine it for the next year. And they said, yes, you can start. And so we started with 5 students in the high school.
Yeah. How many do we have now, Elizabeth?
I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Alex. She would know the numbers there.
I think it's around 50 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How
in
it's
high school, that's 7 to 12.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful miracle that happened, and it's great for all of us.
Yeah.
Harvey would have a better idea of numbers, I think.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. Yes,
Hi, Harvey.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can.
Yep,
Yeah.
good. Look, we're quite happy with numbers in the high school at the moment. Naturally, they go up and down, particularly with the seniors. And we're finding that the IB in particular, we've had to fiddle with that quite a bit. We started out with the main IB course and now running a second one, which is a little bit easier for some of the students who found the work very demanding. So at the moment, yes, the high school is still running quite well. And we also have a group coming through next year in the IB, which is much stronger than this year. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Yeah, things are looking up for the IB, I think, but it's still, some years you only have 1 or 2 students.
Yes.
And so you've got to accept that in the early years of growing a high school. You've got to, and particularly years 11 and 12, you've got to accept that.
Yes.
Most of them from your time, I think, Elizabeth, would probably have left the high school at year 10 to go to some other school somewhere in the area. And we're now keeping some of them and occasionally getting someone from outside to come in. So that's the sort of stage of development that they're at the moment.
Harvey, what's your role at the school?
My role, I'm teaching 3 days a week, and I have been teaching in the humanities areas, I guess. In the higher classes, I have business management. I'm teaching philosophy in stage 5, which I'm really enjoying. And I've done history and Alex was doing English with me for quite a while, but and commerce, So, and geography. Most teachers in a high school setting like that have to teach a lot of subjects.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, what do you think are some desirable skills and talents required to be a principal, and a principal that can last as long as you have?
Oh, I guess it's resilience in a way. I don't know. I mean, you can give a list of, it's like parenting, a list of things that you don't do as a parent and things that you do as a parent. And I can see that, sometimes principals don't really get the problem is, I guess, a Montessori principal is quite different to a traditional principal, I believe. And they really need to lead by example and be a model of the Montessori philosophy. So they really need to empower their staff. They need to ask their staff about things all the time. Like, we used to have staff meetings where we would put a problem out to them and say, how do you think we need to deal with this? Or a policy, we need to have a policy on this. This is the draft. What do you feel? Is this going to work for you? So the staff, I believe, were really, really involved. And I think
empowered.
Yeah. And it took a bit of time because they really have to trust you. Yeah. You have to lead by example, which I've said, and dig in. I believe that leaders that just delegate everything are not learning themselves. And that's something that everybody else is learning around them. And then they start to become frightened by the fact that other people are learning around, they feel threatened by them sometimes. And so I think in a way, it's really tough. But what really helped me was the staff, because I was there to help them. I was there to serve them, and they were there to serve the children. And so I think that they were the ones that really kept me there. I did have a difficult time at one stage with somebody that was not very professional, that basically wrote a letter that said that they were a parent and then sent it off to the department, to all other schools in the area, to and that sort of thing. And the Association of Independent Schools worked with me on that. But I am not a person that likes conflict. So I guess I allowed that environment to be there for a long time. It went on for a very long time. And by the time it was time for me to think about going, I said, I can't leave this situation with the next person. I have to deal with this. So I did. And then there was a backlash, and so I had a difficult time, I have to say. But I loved the job so much that I really just loved it. There was so much variety. It was a job that had everything in it, absolutely everything in it. But
you really see that passion in your voice and your face whenever you talk about the school.
Yeah. And again, the parents, there were some that were just, and it's more the positive parents that are saying, okay, we've got some work to do. Let's just do it. Let's get this done. And, they were the ones that really, really brought the school through as well. Because as I said, the Board of Studies really were tough on us. They made us go through inspections every single year. They wouldn't say, we'll give you 2 years, 3 years. They said, no, we're coming every single year. And they inspected the high school at a different time than the primary. So we had DOCS inspections, primary inspections, and annual high school inspections. So that's why I say Alex and I have been through that, I guess that grill of the first time the high school inspectors came was with Keppa, a Finnish teacher. She called them the Dobermans. But when they came through, they said to me, stop focusing on the individual child.
Yeah.
That's what they said. And I thought, that was in 2000. And I thought, I don't get them. They don't get us. So that was amazing. And then the next year, Alex was on the team in the high school, and the inspector came in, and I walked into the room and he's pointing and saying, show me where this is in the syllabus. And really aggressive. And, and I thought, why are they doing this? And I thought, docs do this as well. Why do they do this when they're supposed to be here supporting us? They come a long way. They're not like that now, but they really were tough on us. And then we had to get the parents to sign a document every year to say that they're not going to get the school certificate. So for years 7, 8, 9, 10, we had to, and then that was to intimidate them, to say, you know, you're not going to get it. And then they got to year 10 and they told us that they would give it to them. We didn't ask them. They just said that, you know, they can have it. So it was just, you know, games.
Yeah. Now, did you sleep during those years?
Look, I do remember. I remember one time when you know, the staff came to me and said, "Oh, you know, this person's really stressed out by this inspection," and I thought, I am too, but I didn't say I am too. I just, you know, but that's the way I felt. I really felt it's tough.
So how did you manage that? You must have managed the work-life balance if you lasted for 27 years.
I was a bit of a workaholic, I would say, and I think I felt guilty about that because my family suffered. And, you know, you could find me doing work on Christmas Day. That's how bad I was.
Like a true Montessorian.
And you know, I realized you cannot do that to your family. You cannot do it to your family.
Yeah.
And I would say my youngest son, when he had his first accident, I had it just changed my life. And I said, no, I need to be realistic here. So, and I think a lot of Montessorians need to talk that out with each other about the fact that they push themselves and they really are probably their own worst enemy. Yeah.
Wow. So would you have any advice for a new principal coming in now?
Well, I guess you've got to look at where they are in their journey. You know, if they're just a brand new principal, then you've really got to put support structures in place to help them because they actually see it differently. They haven't had enough experience to know how they need to behave. And so often they close, they hold information, they don't, you know, they're protecting themselves. It's fight or flight, you know, and so they're protecting themselves. And I think there needs to be much more support. I think governing bodies are really struggling with knowing how to support their principals. I don't think they know how to do it.
Yeah. I love your philosophy that administration serves the teaching staff and the teaching staff serve the children. I think I've seen that at other schools, and it everywhere I've seen it, it works really well to create the right atmosphere.
Yes, I have to say the staff were really the rocks that kept us going through, because they were the ones that really did the work. You know, they were the ones that, and that was why I was there in the first place, because I loved what they were doing for my children. Yeah. And I really wanted to support them because they were amazing, and they didn't have a life-work balance either, you know. So, you know, that's really what hooked me initially.
Do you think that chronic problem in Montessori about lack of work-life balance is part of the reason that we can't find that there's such a shortage of teachers now?
I think it is part of it, and that's why I think we need to work together to support them and make things better for them. And that's why I love the work that's happening with the curriculum, because that's going to make things easier, not easier, but, you know, it's supporting the teachers, because they had to do so much documentation for NISA or for, you know, the various states that was foreign while they were still teaching the Montessori activities and so on. So I think it was a really tough thing for them. And the more the schools share with each other, that's what I love about the IB. The IB have networks that share documents with each other. But I think there was a competitive sort of feeling in Montessori. So I did all this work, and so I'm going to hold on to that work. And perhaps there needs to be a lot more sharing amongst organizations.
So what do you think? What do you think are some of the biggest challenges faced by education in general, and Montessori in particular?
Oh, I think education in general, it's a really big machine that's out of control. I think it's chaotic, just like the hospitals are. I see parallels with hospitals and education. I see that they go to the academics to give them advice on what to do in schools, and the academics have not been in the coalface for a while. And I see that in medicine. Same thing, you know, it's the medical academics that are giving the algorithms and whatever that they need to follow for best practice, etc. And so I just think that it's a really big machine that they haven't got a handle on. And you can see it, they move staff around all the time. Like there's no control, there's no empowerment. So I think it's a really difficult thing. For Montessori, I loved being an independent school, that we were so flexible that we could say, you know, we want to do an excursion tomorrow because there's an opportunity. Alex would say, oh, there's something on down at the harbor, and, you know, bang, bang, bang. We could do that because we were so small. In a big, big organization, you'd have to do things X number of weeks in advance and so on. So, you know, the flexibility that Montessori schools have is amazing. And that's a real bonus. Yeah.
And it sounds like, you know, that idea that you're talking about of, you know, the administration serving teachers and teachers serving children, that attitude is not there. So since that's the key to that feeling, that community closeness and the empowerment of staff and children that you had at Elanira, if that's the key, then since that's missing in education in general, and there's so, you know, lack of trust from the top down, it sounds like that's probably the heart of the problem.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is a very difficult thing for such a big body to deal with, but I think in certain states, like for example, Queensland, seem to allow their principals to have a little bit more say in how they want to. They've got a few schools that can opt out of being with the big system. So they're trialing things, which I think is pretty exciting. So they can make decisions that are outside of what other states can do. So that's showing progress. Yeah, and I guess it's Harvey always talks about empathy as being part of being a good organization and someone being a good leader, and I totally agree with him on that.
So what about Montessori in general? What challenges are faced by Montessori schools?
Well, first of all, lack of resources. We're trying to do we're trying to do a lot. Particularly, I guess, we actually have 2 staff members in a classroom, so that's very different to a lot of other organizations. Mind you, you're covering like 5 levels, whereas in other organizations, you're maybe covering 2 or 3. So to me, I guess if we could be better resourced, that would be wonderful. And I think we waste our resources. And we waste, I can see that there can be duplication in things. And so we're not trying to save in that regard.
How is there duplication?
Well, just at the moment, I can see that we've got different organizations wanting to represent Montessori. And I think the training organizations want to be separate rather than being aligned together to work together to improve training as a group. So they're the sorts of things that I think that was really the beginning, I believe, of our issues when we had staff that were a particular training and others that were a different training. And then within the school, there was conflict on how we did things. Now, I believe that our staff were really quite open-minded and supportive of each other. We had people that were AMI, AMS, St. Nicholas, MWEI. We had everything because a lot of people didn't want to come to Wollongong, right? So we had to find whatever we could, whatever training we could. I asked AMI to come and train in Wollongong, but they couldn't find a trainer that would be willing to do that. So we then contracted MWEI, and they came and did workshops for our staff. And we had preschool, primary, and high school all in the same workshops. And it was a team building. It was amazing. It really built our team. And I think that was part of bringing the values and beliefs together for everybody. I believe our staff were really quite open-minded, but it in the early days, it caused conflict between, you know, what is authentic and what isn't. So that's a really big issue within schools. But when you're in Wollongong, you do what you can for Wollongong. Sydney's a different scene, and I didn't get involved in the politics in Sydney in any way. I steered clear of that and stayed as a very quiet little, place that worked well together.
It seems like to me that there are economies of scale that we miss out on in Montessori, like Catholic schools, you know, they have certain functions, administrative functions that can be taken care of by higher up, by the larger organization that we miss out on because we're always so separate. Each school is so separate, and so there's a lot of duplication there as well.
I think that's a problem though, because there's been the distribution of funds has been very political within the Catholic system, and so that causes mistrust. So I don't necessarily. I think we'd all agree that we would love to have somebody take on the human resources, like to do the dealing with human resources is one part that I think Montessorians feel, oh, look, if we could just focus on education, focus on the children, wouldn't we be happy? But we have to do all of these other things. Yeah. And that's the one that if you could get, specialty support for Montessorians in that area, yes, I think so. But you're going to find you've got rich schools and poor schools, and the rich schools, have built up all of this wealth or whatever, and they don't want to just hand it over to somebody else because the parents feel that it's theirs, So I think you've got a little bit of a problem if you become a system. And they tried to become a system for Montessori. And I think those were the issues at the time.
So you talked about this issue that's endemic in Montessori, that this kind of attitude of the divisions in the community between those who have the true, authentic training, knowledge, and those who are lesser than. Where do you think that comes from? It seems to be a big problem in Montessori, a big division that causes a lot of hurt.
It does cause a lot of hurt. And I think I loved it when we had someone from America come across and say, look, we're all Montessorians together. This is, let's just forget about all of this. And I thought, oh, he's so wise. And we don't want to buy into the big division that happened overseas.
Who was that? Do you remember?
It was Tim.
Oh,
Tim Selden.
Okay.
And so I really liked the sounds of that. That sounded really wonderful. Look, I think that people self-select what sort of training they're going to do. They may not be the right fit. You know, they may not be a true Montessorian, even though they've chosen to do that training. And I've had people that have had the best training that I would say, you know, were disappointing. And then other people that have not had much at all that were just amazing. So, and it was always the children that would let you know. The children told you who they thought were more Montessori than, you know, it was fascinating. So that was the other thing. I always had my ear to the ground with what the children thought about things.
Yeah. So, you know, if Montessori is such a great system, such a wonderful alternative for children, and you paint such a wonderful rosy picture of, you know, what it felt like to be at Elanera during those early years, and, you know, if it has the effects on children that attracted you to Montessori in the beginning, why is it that we still only, after 107 years in Australia, why is it that we only serve 0.012% of children in this country, and only 0.5% of schools are Montessori?
I think that our language has really been static for other people. You know, I think, I know people are trying to maintain the language that was translated when Maria Montessori talked about things. But, you know, if you start talking about cosmic education to some people, they think, oh, she's off with the fairies. And so you've really got to be aware of who your audience is, and or give them translations for what you're talking about. And I think more and more people are interested in Montessori. It is amazing the number of people that they show an interest, but they're not going to buy into it. They show it. Oh, I've heard about that. You know, you've got medical people, speech therapists, physiotherapists. They've all heard of it, but, you know, they're not buying into it. So what is it that, is it the price? Yeah. Is the price too high? Are we elitist? That's why I think it's wonderful that that the United States have really progressed with their public schools, and you know, the documents that they're producing at the moment are really quite exciting. So I think that there's hope for the future, definitely. But I mean, I've just had, my son's just had a second accident, and his friends from primary have come to see him. And, you know, I just think, oh, they're so beautiful. They are such lovely people. And this is what we've produced. You know, it's, yeah.
I've seen that too in schools that I've worked at, where once they leave, they stay a community. They want to be involved with each other because they have such fond memories of of being together at school.
Yes.
Yeah, including.
So we're doing something right. And we used to say that Elanera had magic. There was something magical there. And yeah.
What do you think we need to do to change that situation where Montessori is not more widely known?
Well, I think that the work that you're doing at the moment with, you know, letting other groups know, like the universities know more about Montessori, and letting Steiner and Reggio and all of these other groups know that we're really quite reasonable people. They quite like us. So I think that's a really good message that's getting out there. I think we're going to have to do it through research, and I think we're going to have to do it through the universities, because that's who they listen to. It hasn't worked. Whatever we've been doing hasn't worked, and we really need to. And I keep thinking about the beautiful outcomes that we have, that we're so busy doing so that we can have those beautiful outcomes, but it's the actually documenting and researching and putting it as evidence-based so that it can be shared. And so I think if University of New South Wales will work with us, I think we should be doing that. Really.
Do you think people really care about the research? Like, for example, I think that what Montessori needs, what people like, is a good story. You know, parents in general, what parents or general people want is a good story. And what we've been missing in the Montessori community is, you know, a big Hollywood blockbuster movie about Maria's life, starring Meryl Streep or somebody like that, you know, to tell the story of this fascinating woman and the story of her discoveries about how children learn. You know, it's remarkable that there's never been a movie. I mean, we've had a movie about, you know, King Edward's speechwriter, you know, but we've never had a movie about Maria. How is that? How did that happen?
That is true. It would probably influence people if that's the market that you're looking for. I'm just not sure. I do think that we've got to show the evidence. That's what I think. And, you know, I've been looking at the AEDC questionnaire that they give to the kindergarten children. And I look at that and I see these are Montessori outcomes that they're measuring against. And they're saying these measures actually show a difference later on in schooling. We've linked it. Later on in schooling, we know that the prediction is that they're going to do better than their peers. And we don't have anything like that. And that's what we need to say. This is what by the end of the 0 to 3, these are, you know, the most common outcomes. 3 to 6, most common outcomes. 6 to 9, etc. I think that's really where we need to go.
So maybe, if I could paraphrase a bit, maybe what I'm hearing you say is that what we need to do is to be more associating Montessori with cutting edge learning theory. And that, you know, in the past, Montessori, you know, we've tended to associate the word Montessori with the image of this elderly Italian woman who died 70 years ago. And that, you know, that image tends to promote, you know, without the story, you know, a big blockbuster movie would tell the story, which would be slightly different. But when we put that image of Dr. Montessori, we kind of brand ourselves as out of date and old from the past, you know, whereas what we really probably want to do is to brand ourselves as this is cutting edge education theory, learning theory. And, you know, all of the current best practice in education, for the most part, is what we do and have done in Montessori for a long time.
Yes.
People don't realize that. They think of us as old, obsolete from the last century.
And so we have to reinvent ourselves, but stay true to Montessori, stay true to her design, and but reinvent it so that it becomes exciting for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think Montessori can save the world?
I love the people that she produces. I have to say, they're so. I've worked with so many wonderful teachers that have made a difference to children. I see it with my little grandson that I know that that his progress, a lot of the benefit is from Montessori practices. I know that when my son had a brain injury, that the plasticity of his brain was supported and helped. And I believe his recovery was much better than it possibly could have been because of the way he was taught. I truly believe that.
Changing the world one brain at a time, but we just have to figure out how to scale up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's worth doing.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Elizabeth or any comments who've been listening?
I'd just like a comment, I think, if you don't mind, Mark. Having worked with Elizabeth way back and still there now, I do see the things that we have to perhaps fight back on. I think the American term is push back on, so you don't get swamped by something else. All of those things that Elizabeth was talking about, how she talked to staff and how she understood the children. I felt that was a great time for the school because she allowed us as teachers to try and figure things out ourselves. And if you're wondering why she stayed for so long, I think it was because she was a very good administrator, but she also had a human touch with both the students. And so I think that's what we can't lose, things that from that 27 years, we can't lose that. And we haven't yet at the school. There's still a lot of that still left there. But so they're just my observations tonight. I found Elizabeth's story very entertaining and uplifting as well for people who don't know much about Montessori. They need to know a bit more about the past and how it's been a bit of a struggle, but we've always held certain values close. So I think that's what I would suggest after tonight. We do have a lot to do, and we all have ideas as to how that can happen. You haven't talked much about the impact that parents have had on this, and I think that's something that is a can of worms in some ways, but it's also your understanding of how it's important to have parents on side or their view of it. Have you got anything to say about that, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely. I think the early years, that's when they're really engaged in knowing more. Later on, they start to not be so worried about it. But I think when in the 0 to 6, that's the time you really, really have to focus on parent understanding, so that you're in the same boat together. Because if they're undermining what you're doing, then you're wasting. And that's that Montessori did not want waste. And she did a lot of parenting programs in India. She did it on the radio. She did it as much as she possibly could with parents. So I think it's a really important thing to do. And we should never give up on that. We should always be doing something. Though I think you should be not always asking your staff to do all of that, because you're actually you need to roster it so that everybody takes a turn, so that everybody has time off too. Because I think sometimes we are really hard on our staff. We really need to protect them, and we want them to stay. We want them to be happy there. So that's really important. And then I think the showcases that you're doing in the adolescent program are absolutely essential, You have to do that because they can then see the development. They know they're seeing it with their eyes, they're feeling it, they're hearing it, they're using all their senses to hear and see without you having to convince them. They've got to convince themselves.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about the older, yeah.
Yeah. You can also, schools can also let Montessori Australia do the parenting courses. We're actually starting a positive discipline course this Sunday mornings from 9 to 11:30, goes for 6 weeks. So if anyone is interested, just send me an email, mark@montessori.org.au, and I can give you more information, or it's up on our website under the parents tab. Yeah.
And it's aligned to the Montessori method. So
very much, yeah.
Can I also add something, if I could, for Elizabeth? And look, I was pretty close at the Gymea school, but not too far from where Elizabeth was, and I've always admired what she has been doing and working through in the background there, quietly achieving things at the Wollongong school. That was, I suppose, there was something that I was looking towards, because it's probably like a reflection of what I was doing as well. So we were both in that same sort of situation. We were exiled from the rest of the main Montessori, elite group, and we were working on our own little projects. And so she was like a sister in that respect to me. Yeah.
Sister schools almost,
yes.
In a way.
Yes.
And it was actually knowing that I heard that there were schools that were trying to put the adolescent program into place, and their primary staff were not supportive of it. And that really worried me at the time. And so I really worked hard to say to people, somebody else created your space for you. They created your buildings for you. So we have to have gratitude for who created things before us. And now it's your job to help us create the next level. And the next level will give back to us. They always do. Just like, you've given back to stage 1, etc. And so they really, really came to the fore. But it's when people try to undermine it, then you can lose your high school completely.
It's such a beautiful way of putting it, Elizabeth.
Can I also bunt in? I'm just on the gratitude train.
Sure.
My name's Michelle. I really resonated with that story in terms of supporting and knowing your history. And I also remember Elizabeth saying that Mrs. Dyker used to say that, and the schools in Perth really embrace their history, and all the students will take newfound parents through the school and be so proud of their history and say, this is where the first classroom was, and this is, so everyone knowing where they came from and being proud of that is really beautiful. And I think really important to instilling that motivation back into more maybe corporatized, sterilized environments to sort of bring back that desire, that gratitude to give back. And I also wanted to say, in terms of parents working, I started off as a parent, and I'm sure a lot of people that work in Montessori administration and education came from seeing the amazing work for their own children, and just started, next thing you know, you love all the kids as much as you love your own. And I see that just as the age groups mirror the planes of development between the toddlers at the 0 to 6 and the adolescent program, I see the needs of the parents mirror them as well. That they go through a whole rebirth of insecurity as parents when they see this new animal forge themselves in front of them as well. So, as you said, Elizabeth and Harvey, those showcases, they really need that. Oh, look what your kids are doing. See them blossom in this environment. And so, yeah, that's about all from me in the
Thanks,
darkness.
Michelle. That was lovely.
No, Elizabeth, Hi, honey. That's me, because
Yes.
I have to snip myself off, or I have a tendency to continue for quite a long time. So bye.
Well, on that note, maybe we should sign off for the evening. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, for
Oh,
spending
well,
your
thank you,
time
everybody.
tonight.
That
Thank
was
you.
lovely.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mark, there's someone else. Mark, there's someone else there.
Hi, everyone.
Right.
Can I take 2 minutes?
Of course.
Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth. It was so nice to listen to you. I am from India, Montessori guide for 6 to 12 years old children. I would want to take an opportunity to ask this question. I've been trying to connect with Australian Montessori schools because I'm interested to work there. So I hardly got any response. So I thought, okay, I would ask you here, what's the pathway for me to connect schools, Montessori schools in Australia?
Well, Montessori Australia has a list of the Montessori schools that you could just look on their website. They have contacts and website. It links you to their websites, and it tells you what states they're in and what programs. There's also a section that talks about what qualifications you require to work in Australia. So that would be the first port of call, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it mandatory to have a teaching degree or master's in education? Because I hold my graduation in commerce, which is non-teaching, and I did my Montessori training. So is it mandatory to have Australian's teaching degree?
Yes, you do. You do need to have a teaching degree, and you could apply to see if there were courses that they would accept, but I would say that you would have to do a teaching qualification.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for turning up tonight.
There was
Thanks,
something
Mike.
in the chat.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was, for a toddler Montessori classroom, what would be the maximum capacity? Well, you have to go with the floor space that ASEQA allow for the toddler Montessori classroom. It was 3.5 square meters per child in the floor space, and then 7.5 for the playground. So I think you'd have to look into that, but it depends. If you're running a play group, then it's different. But if you're actually operating an early childhood classroom, then you have to meet the ASEQA standards.
Hi, Elizabeth. Sorry, I don't have my video on. So I'm Marine. I asked a question. I'm actually working in Montessori Academy in Australia. So I just wanted to know this question because our toddler classroom has a 30 children capacity, but I feel like some of the children are really young. We have children starting from age 2 to 3 plus. The children who are 3 plus still haven't had a chance to move to the upper class. So when we have 28 to 30 children in one classroom, I feel like the maximum benefit that they can get using the Montessori lessons are not actually getting. It literally turns into kind of like a play group, and just things keep on running.
Right. Well, I would have to look at the space that you've got. It might be good to actually look at a video of the space that you have for the children, and I'm happy for you to send that to me. And we can maybe talk offline a bit more about it, Marie.
Yes, of course.
Yes, that would be good.
Enrolling in the Montessori quality within practice program would be really important too.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It shouldn't be just running like a long daycare. I think that children should get more time, like individual, like attention to their lessons, to use the Montessori materials, how to use them in the correct way, not just like an educator just sitting and calling all the children, come together, see this how I'm doing, and something like that.
Yes, well, maybe we should have a chat offline about that. We can talk about the numbers and the number of adults that you have in the classroom, and what your schedule is and what you're doing. That would be helpful.
Sure.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Okay. Have you got my email, Marie?
Not actually, not with me. Can I? Okay, give me 1 second, then I can write it down.
Okay, it's elizabeth@montessori.org.au.
Elizabeth@montessori.org.au.
That's right.
All right. Yep, I will send you an email.
Okay, thank you, Maureen.
No worries.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mark.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.